Hello everyone, once again. Trailmakers 2. Is it an update or is it a whole new game? Because calling it 2.0 and having a teaser for it makes it sound like you're having a whole new game. Whether that be because Trailmakers 1 is like too spaghetti code to keep updating, or it could be a bunch of stuff. I'm not entirely sure. People are calling it an update, so I'm going to say it's an update for now. Even if it is an update, not a game. What I wanted to talk about today is like expectations for the future and things that could still be added, which I don't think would be very hard to add at all. So I'm just going to get straight into it. The first thing is to do with logic. We have an altitude sensor, but we don't have a latitude and longitude sensor. So we have the y-axis, but we don't have x and z. If we had latitude and longitude, which would only have to look exact same as this, and I think the easiest way to display the difference between them would to have on the altitude this arrow facing upwards, on the latitude across, and on the longitude like probably they'd have to display it either coming towards or away from us. I don't know how they do that, but they probably figure out something. If we had that, we'd have an entire grid system we could work with. What could you make with that grid system? You could make things like JDAM bombs, and you could, things like that, things that require GPS coordinates. You can make autopilot, auto cars that go to certain GPS coordinates. Everything to do with GPS. On top of that, I am just going to pretend like the distance sensor doesn't exist, okay? So just ignore this for a bit. We're going to ban it right now. We could have a laser designator, which can have an input and an output function. The input function would be that wherever it is pointing, it would shoot out a little laser, and wherever that laser stopped, it would give the altitude sensor, latitude and longitude sensor the coordinates of where it stopped. The output would be the lateral, where anything it was attached to. So if, say, you attached it to turntables, or maybe even mouse controls, could be like a dual function, then the laser would turn itself to where those GPS readings were telling it to go. So that's the whole thing. And then with that, of course, you can get laser guided bombs and anything laser guided you want ever. So I'm really getting into advanced weapons over here, but you hopefully you can see how cool this would be. I don't think it'd be too hard to implement. It'd just be duplicating these, copy and pasting these, but turning them on their side. Another thing that would be, I think, super welcome to this game, and it would help for all people of all creations. For anyone who plays Robocraft, or anything similar, you'll probably know what I'm about to say. Strengths and weights of blocks. What I mean by that is we already have all these skins, but what we don't have is a lightweight, low armored, medium weight, medium armor, heavyweight, heavy armor block. So okay, so why is this relevant? Right now, people complain that plane fights are too long. Plane fights with no auto aim are too long, and tank fights are too short. So what lightweight could make it so that more prettier planes, like these big behemoths you see people make, which are really pretty, but because they're shaped like bricks, they don't fly very well. But hopefully, okay, yeah, I don't have any right now. Hopefully you know about the kinds I'm talking about. I'll put some pictures up on screen, probably. Stuff like that would be able to fly a lot better with these lightweight blocks, right? On top of that, gunfights in planes would now last a sorry, I'll rephrase that. Guns would now do a lot more damage to planes, meaning you only have to strafe a plane once for it to just completely fall apart. Meaning, these now are viable again, because you'd only have to make one pass with one hit for a plane to get badly damaged. On top of that, tank combat and tank building can get more interesting, because you can figure out where you want to put your heavy armor and your heavy weight without getting the thing too heavy and looking like a mouse. And create a nice combination of heavy front armor tank, light on the sides and back, so you can extend those tank fights against larger guns, and maybe even the heavyweight blocks can stop blasters entirely, and maybe not blasters, which is why blasters would be relevant. Another thing I want to briefly touch on in terms of weaponry is dynamite. Right now, I'm not entirely sure if this happens, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't happen. Right now, what the hell is that? Right now, dynamite has a set radius from wherever you place it. So if I were to place these two next to each other, the radius would be about here. But But if I was to drag them away from each other, the radius would now be one here and one there, widening your explosion radius, right? Could we not make it so that putting bombs in series next to each other increases their radius? So, say these 4 right now would only have a radius of like that much, because they just stack behind each other. But maybe, could you make it so that the radius is now like 4 times as big? And this, again, this would be useful for like things like, you know, nuclear bombs. You ever seen those creations where people just stack bombs on top of each other, but the explosion is like a meter in radius? Can you imagine if that wiped out an entire carrier? Now, as much as that would probably crash servers, and it would, you know, kind of make bombs kind of broken and overpowered, so on and so forth, I do think it could be something that could be looked into at least. And hey, you know, it'd make the dynamite maybe more viable than the bomb bay, because right now I don't see a lot of people using dynamite at all. It's usually always the bomb bay. So I just wanted to touch on that really quickly. And the last thing I want to bring up is wing physics, especially when I'm talking about flaps, because I have an example here. Currently, everything to do with wings works perfectly fine, except for flaps. Flaps are reversed. I'll just quickly tell you what flaps are meant to do. When you pull flaps down in the trailing edge, it pulls the slow air underneath the plane for when you're going at those slower speeds, so that you can travel that horizontal and you can fly at much, much lower speeds. It can also help you with pulling air away, because that air gets pushed underneath you, the slow air, as well as being pushed behind you. Right now in Trailmakers, if you do that, I can't pull them down because I haven't put the setting, but if I was to pull these things moving at the back here down, the game would treat that as air being pushed down from the tail, lifting my tail up and pushing my nose into the floor, which is not really what you want. It's the same thing for leading edge. In the real world, leading edge, pulling your leading edge down is supposed to make it so the fast air can travel over your wings easier, creating more lift in that area as well, which is why you see planes like the F-16 having auto leading edge flaps on takeoff. Right now, you'll see that both my leading edge and my trailing edge flaps go upwards. It's because they work backwards in this game. So, if I pull these up, you can see that my plane pitches up naturally, which is kind of what I want it to do a bit more than when I pull them down in this game. So if I pull my gear down now, if I was to try and land like this, you see I can get to pretty low speeds. I can get to 130, 140. I can still have my nose out in front. You see that? 130, 110 even there, 110, and I can still have my nose out in front. That's what you want from flaps. However, if I make them look like flaps actually do in the real world, you'll notice that they have the reverse effect. So as you can see, they're pushing my tail up, which pulls my nose down, which means I can barely lift my nose, and I'm really struggling to pull up here at 230. And that's really not how they're supposed to go. So everything else works fine. Elevators, ailerons, rollerons, rudders, they work perfectly fine, except for flaps. Flaps are backwards. So, small improvements for the future would be to fix flap physics, add those different material weights and masses and strengths in, and then maybe consider adding in those latitude and longitude sensors. I personally as a player would appreciate that. I'm sure quite a lot of other people would as well. And as much as I sound like I'm putting it down sometimes, I'm pretty excited to see what this update brings. So, I'll see you in the next video. I don't know when that's going to be, but I will see you then. Goodbye.